Okay, welcome. 2 is good. That means you'll get to have all of your burning questions answered. It's great to see a face and a name. Fantastic. So this is kind of the mid-module chance to just check in and see if anybody has any questions or comments or concerns or anything about the material that's been hard to understand, or that, yeah, anything at all. How are you going with it, Kurt?
Yeah, everything's pretty fine with me.
Mm-hmm.
I have no burning questions at the moment.
Is this the first one you've done?
Yeah, this is my first one.
All right. Well, welcome. That's good. Oh, I feel the responsibility of being the first. It's quite an unusual one, I guess, from the usual topics that tend to cover. So I feel very privileged that you tune into us first. Thanks. Yeah.
Well, I thought it was a good one to start with as well.
I absolutely think so. Not just because, I'm part of it, but I think it's a good thing to set up early. Otherwise, what happens is people don't really pay attention to mental well-being until it becomes a problem, and then it's a bit harder to draw back and fix up the holes. Yeah. And Kim, if you want to just write anything in the chat or whatever, and then either myself or I can pick that up. And have you done this week's content? So this was all that's done. Yeah. And how are you finding the discussions, both of you? Do you find that there's sort of people are in a similar place to you guys, or are there different ideas there? Or?
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe, Ariana, I have a suggestion. Maybe you want to share your experience from your research candidate chat.
I will, yes, because I tried to put that in my videos and I couldn't do it in my 4 minutes, which became 7 minutes. So as I've said in a couple of my introductions, I've done a PhD twice, or tried to do a PhD twice. The first time was I was enrolled in a clinical PhD because I was doing clinical psychology, and it seemed like a good idea at the time to kind of knock 2 birds out with one stone. So I started for all sorts of reasons. It was the first time I'd ever done a postgraduate course in clinical psychology at that particular university, so things were not fantastically well organised. They are now, so I can say that at that particular place. This is a long time ago. And then also because I was doing the clinical training component next to trying to do research, PhD, and it just, those 2 worlds seem like they should go together, but they don't necessarily. I think the skills that you need, or that get prioritised when you're doing a high degree by research, are quite different from the skills that you need to, or the things that you need to prioritise when you're doing a more clinical training pathway. So trying to combine those 2 was a bit of a challenge. But beside that, I think when I struggled with my topic, and then my supervisor left, and then I took a year off to decide what I wanted to do, and then I decided to go back and start with a new supervisor and start part-time and change my topic to see if that would work. And I kept hitting my head up against it, and it wasn't working. And what I did at that time, which I didn't see at the time, was I just didn't I'd always done really well. I came from that high achieving sort of framework, so I didn't want to accept that it wasn't working, or I thought if it wasn't working, that must be because something's wrong with me, that I'm not smart enough, or I'm just not resilient enough, or not pushing through enough. So I sort of really banged on my own for about 18 months. I think that's about it. So some of my closest friends knew, and some of them were saying, Ariana, in gentle ways, Ariana, are you sure this is what you want to be doing? It's like, no, I do well. I'm, surely I'm smart enough to do. Anyway, so it took a long time until in the end I was exhausted. And what I forced myself to do was the confirmation process, because I thought, oh, well, maybe if I do that process, then I'll know if it's just because that's such an awful process, right? I'll know whether it's, because I'm coming up to confirmation, or because I really don't want to do this. And I did get through confirmation. It just wasn't fitting with where I was in my life. So I did decide to pull back and then to complete the master's. So I have what looks like a 2-year degree that took me 7 years to do. But I went into a little, not a spiral, but it was really hard after that. I grappled a lot with feeling that it was because I wasn't good enough, that I hadn't tried well enough, and I didn't share that with anybody. Then, so it took me a while to get over that, and I never, ever, ever wanted to do a PhD again. And then I had a bit of a midlife crisis and I was working clinically and decided I want to do something else and maybe project management or something. And somebody who knew me and knew that once upon a time I'd been to Norway as an exchange student, knew somebody in Norway who was offering a PhD and suggested I applied. And I was a bit in one of those, oh, what the hell. I did that. And long story short, I ended up in Norway as an international student. So I could speak a little bit of the language from having been an exchange student, but not academic language. I was in a completely different area of the country. I was there on my own. So I can really identify with the fact that adds an extra layer when you're an international student trying to not just get through a PhD, which is challenging enough, but trying to figure out how, in Norway, they have a system where PhD students are considered in between employees and students. So it's a little bit kind of, so you're trying to figure out payroll systems and how to figure out how to get accommodation and how to get visas sorted out and, you know, all those sorts of things on top of trying to get my head around a PhD. And that one it was a very lonely time. So I had a pretty rough couple of years, and then there were some issues that arose with my supervisor that ended up in a conflict resolution process. Anyway, so it was actually in lots of ways awful. It was much more harder, much more difficult emotionally even than that first one. But this time, I think with a few years and possibly having worked in that counselling field myself, I was onto it. I knew, okay, well, if I make the decision to stay, then I've made the decision to stay. So I need to do what I need to do to take care of myself. So I found a counsellor for myself. I made sure that if I was walking down to the bus stop in the morning and I thought, I just can't do this today, I'd go and get a chai latte instead and sit in the park. And then maybe I could face it, you know, go in, and maybe not, and I'd start again the next day. As I think I said in one of my messages, there were a couple of other female PhD students that I'd met at various activities. In Norway, you have to do coursework as part of your PhD, so I'd met a couple of these. So it was a Friday afternoon, which is always a dangerous time to send emails, isn't it? Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, and I sent this random like, hi, I'm thinking of starting a support group for female PhD students. Would you like to join it? You know, and they all said yes, which was nice. And I think it just shows that a lot of people are struggling without us knowing, right? So they're all, I think everybody's searching for connection. You can just feel like you're the only one. So, and that was great. So we would meet up every couple of weeks with a meal, and we just kind of peer support ourselves through it, even though we were studying sort of in the same field, but very different topics. It was just a really good support. I made sure that I put things in place, some self-care strategies, that I reached out to people, that I found what formal processes. So at one time, when things were particularly bad, I actually took about 3 weeks of leave, stress leave at that time. You know, these things are available. It's just that it's really getting over the hurdle. Having worked in universities for a long time, there are lots of support processes in place, lots of mechanisms now to help you through. It really is the biggest burden, the biggest challenge, I think, for HDR students is their own sense of unwillingness to do that, like feeling like they don't want to be seen. That somehow that makes them seem weak, or like somehow if they admit that they're having a hard time at this point in time, that means that they won't make it. But I find actually if you take a break and look after yourself for a short period of time, then you often find the energy and resources you need to actually keep going. Whereas myself now, having supervised students, the ones who do struggle the most are those who keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until it's much harder to repair the damage, so to speak, or to, yeah. So anyhow, so it was, and then I made sure that I made connections outside of PhD. So I had a science fiction group that we'd get together once a week and watch science fiction shows. So, you know, stuff that was completely different from talking about my PhD, but was really important for me to feel like I was a rounded person, that I wasn't just this one task that I had to do in that place. And I made sure that I stayed connected with long-term friends in Australia as well, who knew me before I had a PhD. At one point when I was in a particularly tough time, a friend of mine I'd had for a long time, she said, Ariana, I don't care if you've got a PhD or not, which seems like a simple thing, but it can seem when you're doing a high degree by research, like that is really the thing that defines who you are and your worth as a person. So it was really valuable for me to have a friend say, whether you get one or not, you're still my friend. That doesn't matter to me, you know. I'm not going to be going around saying, oh, my friend Ariana has a PhD or doesn't have a PhD. It doesn't come into it. So I think finding new connections, but also trying to stay connected to old connections as well. So you have a bit of a sense of continuity in your life, that I was something before I was a PhD student and I will be something beyond that as well. Yeah. Anyway, so that's mine. And I managed to finish that one. So, yeah. And I really think it was because I was really determined and proactive about looking after my mental health and well-being.
We have one question.
Yeah.
From Chinmay in a chat. She really she thanked you for sharing your experience, Rihanna. So I will say in her name, I'm doing my PhD in chemistry and physics. I feel that my productivity have dropped when I continuously get criticized, even after doing my PhD work, as well as the other extra work from the other projects. I'm now concerned about my attitude, which is I don't care, and feeling has led to a person who don't be my own word and dealing with accountability and integrity. How to deal with this? I want to be empowered to be the old me again. It's very, very powerful question.
Yeah. So I'm just reading through. Yeah, I think that I find with, the PhD. Sorry, the PhD is the start of it, but this, I don't know, Jimmy, if you're now in academia or that's what you're starting to move into. But one of the challenges I think with that whole academic environment is that it's you're constantly exposing yourself, and it seems like willingly because you're choosing to be there, to criticism. So it's in terms of getting evaluated, your research as an HDR student gets evaluated. It gets evaluated along the journey through all the milestones that we have, through your supervisors, and then of course it has to go to examination. And then in academia generally, there's constant review and evaluation. So it can often feel like you're never enough and you're never good enough. And I think it's natural then, as if you like, I would see your I don't care attitude. Instead of that necessarily being a negative, if I could turn that around a bit, I would say it's kind of like your brain protecting you a little bit, right? It's a little bit like a defense strategy. It's sort of saying, it's, so look at it with kindness, as a kind of bouncy kind of force field that your mind has built up around you, to say, well, if I can convince myself I don't care, then this criticism, this constant vulnerability that I feel will bounce off. So I guess part of, and I'm sure going back to who you are, I think that's important to discover who you are, but you can't necessarily cut off parts of your experience. But it might be about, if you want to continue in academia land, finding some way to balance, letting sometimes through the bits that you need to let through to get your job done. So you do have to expose yourself to peer review in this environment, but finding some ways to be able to put up that kind of force field, or find escapes from that when needed. And that's a challenge. I say it like it's an easy thing, but that's a hard thing that many of us who've been in academia for a long time struggle with. I think one of the biggest things that people struggle with, though, is giving themselves permission. As I said, when you're thinking, I don't care, I'm having a day where this doesn't matter, instead of fighting against that, is going with that a little bit and going, okay, this is going to be one of those days. So today I might do something that's a little bit more formulaic. So I'm going to go and, I don't know, formatting of tables, or doing references, or, reading papers and trying to fill myself up, rather than trying to push myself to do something that obviously my mind is having a lot of resistance to at this point in time. I think in terms of finding yourself, as I said, if you can connect to people who've known you or who know you currently outside of the PhD environment, or sometimes if you have strong enough friendships within the HDR environment or within the early academic environment that sort of transcend, where you're capable of speaking about more than your research, then that is really valuable for giving you a sense of yourself as being other than this. Sometimes in a different context, I had a friend once who went through a divorce, having been married for a long time, and she said, I don't even know what it's like to be a single person. And sometimes when you're doing an HDR it can be hard to remember what you were. So her friends got together and we did a little album of what she used to be like. We said, well, you might not remember, but we remember what you were like. So maybe if you have people in your life, family or friends, you can do that, actively asking them, I'm feeling like I'm losing myself. I'm feeling like I don't remember who I was anymore. Seeing if there are people in your life you can actively ask, can I borrow some of your memories, if that makes sense, of me? Can you remind me about, who I was or who you see me as something to hold on to? And I think, this is a hard time. So it is a time to sort of work through how much do I want to keep about this experience and how much do I not want to keep, I guess. So it is a bit of a, yeah. And also I'm, a bit advocate of getting somebody else professionally to help you out with that. It doesn't mean that you have to go for months and months and months of counselling, but sometimes just a couple of sessions to help have somebody outside of your own mind reflect yourself back to you can be really valuable, and ask the questions that you might not know how to ask, or ask them in a particular way to help you find your way back to who you were. And, a good counsellor is very skilled at that. That's something that they do a lot of. So I don't know if there's any ideas in that, but it is a frightening thing when you wake up after those years of having concentrated so hard and sort of saying, I don't know who I am anymore and I'm not sure I like what I've become. But you can find your way back. I guess what I'm saying, even in terms of telling my stories, please don't do it alone or feel like you have to do it alone. Feel free to ask people. People who love you will be dying to help you find yourself again.
Hi, Desi.
Hi, Desi. Welcome. Thanks, Jimmy. Hi, Desi. Thanks for joining us. If you have any questions or comments or anything you want to throw out, feel free to.
You can also write if you're not able to
write in the comment section, or the chat section, sorry.
So Ariana just shared her experience from her candidature. And if you want to share anything with us or have any questions, you can do that.
Yeah. I'm also open to talking about that, not today, or if it's too hard or whatever, then feel free. That's okay, Desi. That's fine. Chat's good. I think following on, I've just been thinking about saying to Jimmy, it can feel when you're in the midst of it that your PhD or your high degree research is everything, because the world that you're in, we talked this week about the environment and what the environment tells you, and academia can tell you that it is everything, that everything depends on it. And it's certainly important and absolutely important, but it's, my biggest advice to myself that I'll pass on is it's really not. It is important and it's what you do, but it's not who you are. And when you go out into the world and chat with other people, they might be fascinated or impressed by the fact you're doing a PhD. But they won't see that as everything either, right? It won't be the be all and end all. So, try to connect also with environments that let it see that you help you to see that it's a part of you, but it's not all of you. I think that's really valuable. I once had a friend, I think I was struggling with inadequacy feelings. A friend of mine said, but you have a PhD, Ariana. So yeah, but you have to understand that I work an environment where everybody has PhDs, right? But it can help you, it can make you lose perspective in terms of, you know, what really is important or how things are viewed out there. Or
Do you maybe you want to share what are your tools to cope with normality?
I can share and like tell you what I used. I don't want them to see and try it, but these are some things, you know, when I was going through particularly that second experience. The first experience, the thing that probably kept me there long was just my kind of stubbornness, but also I had a really good group of other PhD students around me. So social connectedness is very important to me. So that won't be important to everybody, but feeling like I've got good social networks was important. So a couple of the, so that's always been important. So as I highlighted, you know, even in that, when I was overseas doing it, that kind of setting up that support network for myself was really important for getting through, both the ones that were connected to the HDR experience and the ones that were outside of that altogether. Both of those played a role in keeping me sane. The other things I used to do at a time that I was finding it tricky was I'd get up in the morning. Okay, this sounds a little bit silly, but you can find your own thing. I'd get up in the morning and I would make my bed every morning, which I know you should do anyway, but you don't always do you? But I would make my bed every morning and I would say to myself, I was struggling with some depression or depressive feelings at the time, I say, if I can't make my bed in the morning, if that's too much, like even that is just feels overwhelming and I can't do it, then I know it's going to be a rough day and I'm going to need some extra help. So I'm going to have to reach out to a friend, or I'm going to have to do something that's a little bit more, you know, really actively self-caring, if that makes sense, if I can't do that. If I get up in the morning and I make my bed, even though I'm generally going through a tough time, then I'll feel like, okay, I can take the next steps to get through the day. And to this day, I cannot walk out of my house without making my bed. So I would suggest that's just an example, but it's an activity of building your own little signals, I guess, to yourself around how am I doing today, right? And whatever that is for you. So for me, it was a making bed thing, but it might be whether or not you can face eating breakfast, whether it's not, you know, like, yeah, whatever it is for you. I found that like just a really good check-in with myself. Of course, I was living by myself on my own, so I had to do my own check-in, but it might be that you can, if you're living with other people, then you can, you know, invite them or, you know, ask them to help you out with that check-in process. One of the other things that I had was, and I cringe a little bit when I say this, but I'll explain what I mean. I had a gratitude journal. You'll probably find out when we get to it next week. I'm not the biggest fan of meditation as in sitting in a room looking at a candle. That's just me. So for some people, that's extremely useful. And I will, in my clinical practice, I'll suggest that. But if you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, mindfulness and rolling your eyes and, you know, I can't do it or I can't meditate, I hear, right? Like, so it's about finding other ways to do that. But we'll get to that next week. But so when I say about gratitude journal, what I had little rules around it. So every day I'd have to write down at the end of the day, I had to have 5 things that I was grateful for, no more and no fewer. So I had to come up with 5, but no more than. So even if I was grateful for a lot that day, I had to stop at 5. They had to be actual concrete things that were associated with that particular day. So I couldn't pull in things that I might be grateful for, you know, that happened next week, or that, you know, like last week or yesterday, or that I was projecting forward to. There had to be real concrete things that were associated with something that happened during that day. And they could be anything. So I might have, for example, I'm grateful for buses because I didn't have a car when I was in Norway. So I'm grateful for buses because they help me to get where I need to go. And I'm grateful for, what else I might say? Well, as I said before, sometimes a chai latte was my poison of choice if I was having a rough day. So I'd be grateful maybe for a chai latte that day because that was what helped me get myself into uni on that particular day. I'm grateful for central heating because in Norway, you know, central heating is important, and that meant that I felt comfortable. But then in amongst that, I might have, I'm grateful for my friend Liz, because she might have phoned me on that particular day from Australia and helped make my day. So there'd be a blending of things, but it had to be 5, no fewer, no more, and it had to be things that were directly related to that particular day. And it seemed like a simple thing, but it was just a real, in a sense, that's a mindful exercise. It was something that really grounded me each day, that brought me back to thinking about how simple things can make a big difference in your life. So that was a strategy that I found helpful. What else did I do? I went for lots of walks. I didn't have a car, so walking was really, I'm not a sporty person. I did go to the gym occasionally, but just, walking in nature, I find still is one of the most effective strategies for me in terms of clearing my head, but also nature helps you connect to something that's bigger than yourself. So when I was doing that first PhD that didn't work out so well, I was living on the Gold Coast, and I would do long walks up and down the beach, which I found quite soothing. I find that the idea that the ocean doesn't care, it will come in and go for millions, billions of years. It doesn't care whether I have a PhD or not, just come in and go. And I find that quite a soothing sort of thought. I did, I still do, but I did at that time. So I say find some sort of activity that takes you away from your desk or your work. Nature, I think, is effective for most people, but if not, it might be something else. I like doing handicrafts, so like knitting and those sorts of things. So I find those as well. I would try and have some sort of project on a go that again was kind of like mindful, that I had to concentrate, but also it was that another thing that was part of my life before my PhD and part of my life that's continued that was not connected at all with my studies. So it reminded me that I am a person that is something other than these intense kind of studies. So that was, so find something, I would say, that you enjoy. Maybe it's new, I would say both. If you can find old things that you can keep going that you enjoyed and new things to take up that you enjoy, then that's a really good strategy. I was lucky enough, the first place that I rented had a bath, so I would take baths. Never underestimate the power of a nice warm bath. And a good novel. So I guess, there's a whole range of things from the very simple and then I did, particularly for that last year of my PhD in Norway, when I decided, okay, Ariana, because there was a period where I had to make a decision, am I going to go or am I going to stay? Am I going to leave or stay? Knowing how tough it is. And I remember actually saying to myself, you've made this decision to stay, Ariana, so you need to put some things around you now to help this happen. So I did, through personal networks, find a counsellor, a psychologist. So I would go every week, and some weeks I didn't want to, and some weeks I was a bit cranky with her, but I'd turn up every week, and it was helpful. Not, again, it was definitely from the therapeutic point of view in terms of how she helped me to work through my thoughts and feelings, but also just from that discipline perspective. Every week I need to go. It's regular, it's a routine, it's something that I can hold on to, like when otherwise things might seem a little bit less under control. So so my strategies, range from the kind of very banal to the very formal kind of forms of intervention as well, I suppose. And every single one of those was important. In fact, the getting up, making my bed thing, it's, that was pretty important for getting me through 4 years.
Desi ask you a short question as well, Ariana.
Yeah, sure, Desi. Let me see. Open the chat. Desi, can I ask you something? I just recovered from COVID-19 and it makes me feel down, having no spiritual. Right, so when you say make up your mind, I guess you're thinking about, I don't know, do correct me if I'm wrong, about whether you want to even stay in the PhD or not. Is that right? Can you just give a thumbs up or say yes or no? I mean, first of all, while I hear that, I would say that, recovering from COVID-19 is, if the physical recovery is one thing, it's not to be sneezed at. So it's a big deal, right? And it may take more than just the kind of physically feeling a bit back on your feet. I think there's the recovering from the sickness, but also I think there's this, I perceive it all over the world, particularly in Australia, this general haze of anxiety and almost a bit of hopelessness as well, which is easy to feel at the moment because there seems to be so much that's heavy and difficult on all levels. We've got COVID-19 still with us that we thought would go away within 1 year, and it's still with us, right? We've got wars happening in Ukraine, elsewhere. We've got floods happening here in southeast Queensland, northern New South Wales, and people are exhausted. So I guess my first message to you, Desi, would be it's okay to take the night time you need to heal properly, and that's, you know, healing not just in terms of your body, but, you know, in terms of feeling like you're really back inside your body, if that makes sense. So I would explore options around, you know, seeing if you can take a little bit more leave of absence if, you know, you're still not ready to come back, and definitely the university has options for doing that. And then, yeah, so give yourself some proper time to heal more than your body, because it's a significant illness, and it's wrapped around what else is going on, I think, in terms of generally psychologically, for us personally as individuals, but also for the environments that we're in and even the countries that we're in. So taking some time for yourself. And then I'd say, you know, think about those strategies that I've just talked about in terms of strategies that help you, that can help you while you're doing the high degree bio research, but they can also help you while you're doing that decision making process. So yeah, doing some self-care, talking to people, talking formally to people, talking to other, you know, if not your supervisor, there might be some other mentors or some other students who are a bit further along about how they manage to keep the motivation up. There's also, you know, having worked at QT, there are a lot of resources out there that look at this. Is that right? I mean, you know, in terms of how to keep your, and at other universities too, I know, because it's recognised that this is a real thing, that people struggle with keeping that motivation up at the best of times, let alone in the midst of a global pandemic and everything else that's going on. So there are lots of resources there that are designed to specifically to help students work through exactly that question you have, like, you know, can I keep going? And if I do, how do I keep going? So, you know, yeah.
Another option is also your supervisor. Relationship with your supervisor is crucial here.
Absolutely.
You should expect the support from the team as well, or at least a very honest discussion.
Yeah, and like some people that's easier than others, so it can depend. You know, the supervisor relationship is it's an unusual relationship that doesn't occur anywhere else in nature, I tend to say, because it's not exactly a teacher, it's not exactly a friend, it's not exactly like a line manager as you would have in an organization, and yet it's all three of those things. So it can be that you have a really good, even if you have a really good relationship, you still might not feel comfortable talking about things that you're struggling. What I find with most supervisors, though, is that they're much more receptive to that. They're much more willing and able to be supportive than students often think they are. At least somebody in your supervisory team. So that was, as Orla was saying, that would be my first port of call, is just talk through your thinking. You don't have to have made a decision. You can just say, I'm at a point where I've come back from sick leave and I'm just floundering a bit here. I'm just not quite sure where I'm going or what I'm doing. And they may be able to, I mean, they have a duty of care, so they might be able to put some things in place around the PhD itself to help structure that for you in a more manageable way. And then the things that they may not feel best able to support you with in terms of that kind of more emotional support, then they should have places that they can send you or suggest that you get in touch with to help you with that. They may even have ideas about, as I said, kind of mentoring students or early career researchers that you can talk to about their process. So yeah, your supervisor is often a very good resource. And I would say try not to be as afraid as people often are about their supervisors in terms of going to them and asking for help. If you're feeling like, no, that's really not an option, then yeah, try some student counselling services, even if they should be able to offer you some, but if not, they can help you out in terms of some areas to go, but also whatever the HDR kind of support office is in your particular university. So I don't know, Desi, if you're at QT or elsewhere, but I find the graduate research services office at our university is actually really helpful with that sort of stuff. You're welcome.
The other
Reject
area
is my
also-
motto. Sorry.
I can add also we have student reps, which they actually play a very good mental support role in our university. They do a lot. So you could check who is that person at your faculty and just connect. You don't have to, like Ariana said, she had her science fiction group. You don't have to talk about your research. You just need this connection, your support group, which can be there for you. Not always about your research, but just about the experience.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's fallen away, which is unfortunate with, you know, the lots of flexible work arrangements, which are great, don't get me wrong, is that sense of connection has sometimes been a bit lost. I think it used to be that PhDs were all grouped together in the same room and you're kind of there most of the time with each other. And that was a good opportunity in both of my experiences. That was incredibly vital for me in terms of staying afloat, was having those connections with other people. And yes, it might start talking about your PhD, but you will form kind of like natural connections or friendships where it rises above that and you can socialize in ways that hopefully aren't always just talking about your research. So yeah, and I think that I understand, you know, there's less opportunity, or that's harder now for people in terms of even if they are on campus, lots of other people aren't. So yeah, maybe seeking out some other opportunities for that, seeing if there are kind of clubs or societies that you can join. Or yeah, just thinking about an activity that you really like to do, as I said, one that you used to like doing that you maybe have let slip, or one that you've always wanted to try, you know. Or start your own, as I did. Just randomly email some people and say, hey, you want to join my group? Food is always a great way to get people connected. So suggesting, you know, you have them bring a plate, or suggesting you get together somewhere with somebody, yeah, a coffee or whatever, and chat. That's often a good strategy.
The other way I could suggest, the other way to connect is maybe try another module, which is called write your journal article in 12 weeks, because how that module is structured is you work in a small peer feedback review group of 4 or 5 students, and then you really connect together. And sometimes they are not from the same research space, but you give feedback to each other, you support each other, you share your experience, you also try to keep accountability together on writing. So you tell yourself, your group, how many hours you think about writing this week and other activities. So it really helps you feel a part of nice, close group.
Yeah, and that reminds me, one of the times I've met people within academia, both as a research student and as an early career academia, is doing a retreat. And often there can be some financial support for that. So they might be called writing retreat, which is good, you get to go away and write, but often it's, particularly if there's an opportunity to stay overnight somewhere, then the best connections happen around, you know, the dinner table or the breakfast table or whatever, and just getting to know people. And through that experience, I've made incredible connections, both as a PhD student, as an early career researcher, with people in completely different fields from mine, right? So, but yeah, connections that have turned, sometimes I haven't, sometimes it's just, oh, that was a great conversation, but you know, that was nice. But other times I've formed friendships with people that I still catch up with today, even though they're in fields that are very different from mine. So and there are opportunities often, or I know sometimes, sorry, I should say, that come up to do those retreats, and they'll come on board a bit more now that the COVID thing is settling down a little bit. So if there's an opportunity to do that, or to do some kind of like conference or something like that, where you actually get to go and be in rooms with people. Human beings are very social animals. We're a social species, and for all that being online is very convenient, from an evolutionary perspective, we still function best when we can be in rooms with one another, when we can be physically close to one another. There's something that happens, I think, yeah. So I'd say if there are opportunities do come up to connect with people in those kind of more kind of intense sort of ways, then yeah, take them with that. And that's another good thing to ask your supervisor or whoever the HDR coordinator is for your particular school or department, and say, are there opportunities like this available to do this kind of thing?
So DESE is actually still overseas.
Ah, yes, DESE overseas, yeah. So that's even harder than to feel connected.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm.
Stay strong.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you're really torn because you're trying to connect to, yeah, to do research in a country that's very far away. And then your social supports would be where you are. So, but you know, there's all sorts of virtual communities. So I don't know if this is where my ultimately help out in terms of helping somebody like DESE to connect, you know, virtually with other HDR students here. Or maybe that's something the university could look at, is how can they form some sort of virtual support groups for people who are.
So if you wish, DESE, I can send you a big list of Zoom workshops we currently run. We have also a special writing lunch when you come, connect with other students, but actually write your own thesis. I'm not sure if you heard about this lunch. If you don't mind, I can send you a few important links and offerings.
And again, you know, oh, sorry, yeah. And if you're communicating with your supervisors, say, I'd like to maybe make some connections with other international students or other students, and seeing if maybe the HDR as a staff member who's responsible for postgraduate research students in whatever your school you're connected to, or faculty or whatever. In our school there is, so I can only speak to that. And you know, it may be that there's rather, because it's very threatening to look through a whole list, they might, you know, instead of looking through a whole list of all the HDR students in a particular school, having somebody else maybe do that work for you. So I'm looking to connect, maybe you can suggest a few people for me to reach out to and see if we can set up a virtual Zoom social club or something, you know. Yeah, so because I think that connection about research is important, but for me personally, I find that connection about something that's more than just about research. Research might be the starting point, but finding things to connect and ways to connect that are about more than research is good. So it's harder from overseas, but definitely just ask supervisor, ask the HDR coordinator, can you suggest or give me the names of some people? Because I guarantee that there will be some other people in your field, other students, HDR students, who are also crying out to make those connections.
Do you have any other questions to Ariana? Yeah, all good.
Okay, well, up until now, we've kind of been setting the scene, if you like, mostly in the module. And then next week, we're going to move into talking a little bit more about, so what can you do about it, which I guess is what some of you have been asking here, right? Like, what can you do to try and better look after your mental well-being? And then, you know, when things get a bit too much for you on your own, where can you go otherwise to seek help? So that'll be kind of the next 2 weeks in particular. And then in week 5, we're trying to kind of launch you to thinking beyond even the HDR experience, to how can I set up good patterns around my mental well-being that I can take forward into life generally. Whether it's like me, making sure you make your bed every morning, or something bigger than that. If nothing else, when you get through this, you can boast to everybody that you got an HDR in the time of COVID, and people will just be in awe. Wow, you really did it tough, right? We thought our PhD was hard, but my goodness. And there's certainly, amongst my colleagues, there's a lot of understanding about the fact that it's really tough at the moment. And if you have any other questions, you could post them. And there was a May We Help, is there, on the Padlet, Ola, in terms of, yeah. So you can put your question there. If it's something that you're not real comfortable, you could just put something like, oh, I'd have a question, can you email me or something? And I can always email you through Blackboard, just email you directly and talk to you that way if anything comes up in the material that you have questions about or concerns about. Chances are if you have a question, then other people will have that as well. So I would encourage you, if you feel comfortable, to put it up there. Nobody else?
Thank you, Ariana, for sharing so many tools today.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And if I think of some more, I'll put them up on the Padlet as well. Yeah. Thank you all for joining me today and seeing that I am a real person.
So thank you. We can finish for today.
You're very welcome. Okay, thanks everybody, and I hope
Nice to meet you,
I hope get
everyone.
something out of the next couple of weeks. Yeah, lovely to meet you. And you'll see me for the wrap-up video at the end of this week. Thanks everybody.